Discussing bin books.
The time is now 6:30. I'm calling to order the Pickens County Council work session of Monday, March 10th, 2025. First item up is the invocation to pledge allegiance to myself. Heavenly Father, we know the greatest wisdom always comes from those who choose to follow and serve and honor you. Be with each council tonight. We honor you through our discussion, our debate, and our votes. May the results of our decisions truly benefit those in Pickens County. God bless our troops around the globe and also stateside, as well as our law enforcement officers and first responders here in Pickens County. In your loving name, Jesus, dear Lord, we pray, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 2A, second reading of the ordinance amending procedure for the allocation of Pickens County recreational funds. I'm going to make a motion to approve that as it appears in the packet. Do I hear a second? Any discussion? Okay, this is going to be the third vote on this ordinance. There'll be 4 in total. There'll be 2 opportunities for public input. We've had 1, and the next opportunity for public input on it will be on Monday, April 7th at the regular board meeting. Any other comments? Okay, those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Next item is 2B. That's county employee pay and retention and training. Mr. Roper, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. If it please you tonight, we have with us our Human Resource Director, Samantha Greer. She's going to step us through some information from some of this is from last year when we began the compensation study, Mr. Chairman. But the idea is here we want to make sure that those members of council who didn't go through that process understand our rationale, and you can see how we're bringing it forward for the next step, which should occur in this budget year. So we're trying to show you some of the background and then talk about some of the things we want to do in terms of employee surveys and some of the things we like to do with training. So a lot of this for some of you will be reviews. For other of you, this will be the first time you've seen this. Feel free to ask questions. Sam was with us through this whole process, helped guide it, and really did well as we went towards handling our compensation study. So I will turn it over to her.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me tonight as I review some of our key items found during the compensation study and then during implementation. So Pickens County began the competitive bidding process in July of 23, where we began to select or receive several different proposals. This is where we evaluated about 6 or 7 proposals, and we elected in Evergreen Solutions in September 23. The purpose of this study was to improve recruitment and retention efforts, to ensure competitive and equitable compensation, and then to align our pay structure with the market trends. The study found quite a few inconsistencies with our pre-study conditions. If you review in your folder here, Exhibit 2A, it'll provide you what our pay plan summary was before we implemented the compensation study. You'll see here that it starts from grade 6 and goes through grade 58. Grade 6 began at the minimum hourly rate of $11.80 an hour, and then grade 58 started at $119,000 annually. So there's a big gap between grade 6 and 58. While we're reviewing the same summary, you will notice that between the minimum pay ranges and the maximum pay ranges, there is a 40% range spread, which is probably the only consistent item on this pay plan. There are inconsistencies in the midpoint progressions. Usually you would want that to remain the same through each pay grade. And over to the right, second column towards the end, you'll see that several of them are anywhere from 8% to 7% to 3%. Another inconsistency with the pay plan, if you review the highlighted areas, pay grade 23 starts at 55,000, whereas pay grade 24 started at 54. So those are just some of those examples. Another item that was very important that was found during this was new hires were being hired in at the same pay rate as existing employees with 4 and 5 years of tenure in their role.
I think the way she puts that on the slide, creating internal equity
Mhm.
concerns is a very nice way of putting it.
The official. Evergreen conducted on-site interviews and focus groups. This was very important to receive feedback from employees to make sure they felt involved in the process. Those focus groups began January 22nd through January 25th, and then the survey was released January 21st. Out of 725 employees at that time, we did receive 310 responses. During that survey to employees, the first 3 questions asked why employees chose Pickens County as their employer. You'll see here that those top provided answers were location, opportunity to make an impact, relationship with coworkers, benefits and retirement package, and then the type of work. Then the next question was why do employees remain at the county? And you'll see that these answers mimic the last. It would be location, they enjoy the work that they perform, retirement, the hours and work schedule, work environment, and the relationship with their workers. During that same survey, employees were able to identify positive aspects of our benefits package. Here you'll see where retirement came in with about 80% of employees thinking that was a key benefit to the county package. Another was holidays. We received about 75% of employees electing holidays was an important factor. 75% of employees selected health insurance, whereas 50 to 70% of employees found that just vision and dental were the most important in our benefits package. Here they were given the opportunity to decide, or if they could choose, what changes they would make to the benefits package. The top answer you'll see came in at 60%, where employees stated pay time off, PTO, they would like for that to be reassessed. They would like, instead of having a separate vacation and sick accrual leave bank, they want one PTO. And then overall, employees stated that the health insurance benefits were a really great plan that we offered, but they just prefer that we not choose or change carrier. So in the past, to bring you up to speed, we changed to United Healthcare after being Blue Choice for several years. So we've moved back to Blue Choice. One extra thing I'd like to add on here that you will not see here shown on the graph. A lot of employees stated that they would like to have our inclement weather policy reassessed. They did not feel that it was fair that they are required to use sick or vacation time during any kind of inclement weather closure. And then one added note is a positive note. They really appreciate the on-site and they hope to continue seeing that here. Here you will see the market salary survey where Pickens County provided 20 tier suggestions, but we received 15 respondents. Here are the list of those respondents: Anderson County, Greenville County, Oconee County, several municipalities. We get measured a lot with the Pickens County School District as well as the SCDOT for a lot of our drivers. During that comparison with our peers, we came in with a pre-assessment pay plan, seeing that we were being paid at 1% below the minimum market, 3.3% below the midpoint market, and then 6.0% below the maximum market. In the same survey, peers were compared to our benefits package. And during that comparison, it was noticed that Pickens County contributes more to its benefits package as an employee's total compensation package. We also cover a larger percentage of our health insurance premium. So we cover approximately 91% on average of that cost. And then also the county does offer less time for holidays and paid time off compared to our peers. Here we are going to move into the proposed pay plan that was actually implemented in the last fiscal year, or the one that. If you go to Exhibit 6A in your folder, you will notice there are 3 separate pay grades, or pay plans, excuse me. One for fire and EMS, and that's for the 24, 48-hour shift, police, and then your general employees. A misconception that was put out there originally was that there wasn't enough pay grades for police or fire and EMS, and the reason for that is a lot of our administrative and managerial roles are actually in our general pay plan, so there's a spread there. As you move into Exhibit 6B, which is the next page, this is an expanded version of our grade and step progression. So you will see the pay grades going down to your left and the steps going across the top. It was too large to fit on one page. So it goes all the way to step 14.
This is the current plan?
That is the current plan. Some of the positive feedback that we've received from departments so far is that they are able to fill their vacancies a lot faster, and we're actually pulling from other counties, so it shows that we're being more competitive right now. We've also received in recent meetings with departments, employees have stated to their management that they appreciate knowing that they're going to naturally progress in their pay grade at least one step per year. Beforehand, they didn't have that luxury. And then there are a few additional positions right now that need some focus based off the duration of their vacancy. So I think they need some special attention outside of what's been implemented. And then for our next steps and recommendations, every year we will, or part of the implementation, employees will be moving naturally in their step plan. So they will move one annual step a year. It was suggested that we recommend a 2-to-1 experience credit ratio. And what that means is when we're hiring new talent, if someone is coming from a different company and they have 4 years experience and they want to come here in the same role, we can at least match them at 2 years. So every 2 years of outside experience would be 1 year inside experience. The challenge with that is how do we implement that with our existing employees? So right now we are hoping to just implement that with our specialized roles and our managerial roles, and then look at that in the future. Another suggestion is educational and credit, or educational and certification credit. This kind of mimics Greenville County and I believe Oconee County. They offer up to anywhere from 5 to 15% coming in for new talent for military service, bachelor's, master's, and associate's degrees. That also comes with a similar challenge, though, of how do we implement that with our existing employees and what does that cost? Part of our next steps, we will be releasing an employee survey in August. This is to gain additional feedback on how the implementation of the comp study has had an impact on them here at the county. And and then last but not least, this is a list of our training that we send employees to for professional development. It is with National Association of Counties, South Carolina Association of Counties, Appalachian Council of Governments, and then our internal Pickens County.
These are, and I would add, these are in addition to the
training that's necessary for your job. For example, an EMT's certifications or law enforcement certification. This comes about from a couple of years back when we had self-identified that we needed to be growing our talent inside the house. You know, we need to be making sure that we're supporting people, recruiting from within. We've had a very good positive experience with these different levels of training for our next leaders. As a matter of fact, I see three of them sitting right here that have been through those programs and stayed with us as they do. So we're very proud of that. There was one other issue going back. The idea here to wait till August to do the next step employee survey. I think it's important for us to do a survey, but I do believe that the employees are going to want to see if we keep the implementation of the salary study. Was it a one-off that we did one time and then we walk away, or were the assertions we made to them, which have an annual cost over the last year, that we're going to stay true to that commitment for the next step for everybody and the step after that? I think if we demonstrate that, we'll see that in the results. So that's part of our thinking for waiting until August to do that, because we're hoping and trusting that as you all set that as a priority and the staff set that as a priority, that the budget will allow us to.
Absolutely. So as we conclude, I'd just like to add one recommendation left from Evergreen, and that was to conduct a compensation study at least every 2 to 5 years, just to ensure that we're following the market.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Council Bowers, this was top priority. Yours,
Yep.
what you got?
So, really, Julie, thank you for the overview. That was very important. Knowing the work we did last year, having the 2 new council members coming on, I think it was important for them to understand kind of where we were to where we are and then what the next steps are. The other piece to it is not wanting to, 8 years ago, we were the highest paid county around, and that was very short-lived. We felt good about it for about 6 months, and it was very short-lived, which is the reason for the Evergreen study that we did, and catching back up and want to stay on track. That was the reason that it was a priority. Same thing with the training and all that, just kind of an update to, none of that was really a priority or a thing just a few years ago, so.
Questions? I'm unclear what the ask is for right now.
There's really, I don't really have an ask. This was just an overview. If there were to be an ask, it would be the 2-to-1 ratio and then the additional steps for degrees and certifications and such.
It seems like is fixing this, the exhibit 2A where we talk about some of the pay bands, some of the grades are messed up.
That was solved. That's one.
This is one that's already been solved.
That's been solved.
That's where we started, and then the next is where we are,
That's okay, thank you.
which was what I thought was important
Right.
for the others.
And because what I remember from after we passed last year, we said, go ahead and clean up all the pay bands, basically was the directive that we gave last year. But we said, knowing that the next thing we need to do is address current employees who basically on longevity, on seniority in their positions. And we sort of said that was going to be our next step. So I was expecting, I see what you said with the 2-to-1 and stuff, but I thought, or have we, or maybe I'm speaking ahead, that the next thing we were going to look at funding was combing through everyone who's currently here and seeing who has been gone too long without getting a raise they deserve, or who has someone several years under them who's making the same amount they are, and there's adjustments. I thought that was our next step.
And I will say, and Sam can correct me on this, that has been an ongoing project. The employees have been good about coming back to us and saying, like, you know, my salary doesn't reflect what I actually have in terms of experience here. And they've had to do new, what we call now JATs, the job assessment tools. We'll send people back and they'll do additional JATs. I don't know how many of those you've revisited over the last year.
Not quite a few. I would say maybe 12 or less. I have had some management speak on their employees, and they feel like they weren't compensated fairly, and that's some of the ones that I'm looking further into, just to make sure that they were measured correctly.
Those end up being case by case, I guess.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, the true ask is to fund the next step in the budget. That's the true ask.
Well, what about the COLA? Is it gonna be a COLA too?
Well, we hope so. We got to talk about revenues here in a couple of weeks, Mr. Chairman. So if you just do the step every year, but the COLA is more than the step, you're falling back behind, which is the point you're making. So we hope we're going to be able to do both, but that's still pending a lot of other priorities that we've got to bring to you all. So really, this is intended, and I appreciate Mr. Fowler saying that, as context when you get that budget here in a few weeks and you see that we prioritize that step, you'll know some of the story behind it.
As far as looking forward, I think the step COLA is a good idea. Education, I've been very weary of. I saw that in the school system. I mean, when they start, you have a grade of a job, you have youth service, and then you add another column for education. 18 hours, bachelor's plus, all these columns. You get PhDs in gym teachers all over the place. You're paying top scale. I mean, to me, the driver is the job. What is the value of the job? Every job has a different value. That's the number one driver. And then, of course, is your experience in that job. See, that's why your grade, that's your grade is the value of that job. Then your years experience move you out that way. When you add education to it, I mean, there's certain certifications that are required. I get that. But when people are just running to get a master's degree or running to just get a PhD, and they don't change their job, I mean, it's like I said, you got how many PhDs are in teaching gym class?
But
Probably a lot.
I'll tell you, Mr. Chairman, it's a fair point because that was a
scale.
dynamic. It's not as big a dynamic with us as it was in the school system. I don't know.
Well, because
why.
they're educated by
Yeah.
teachers, so they
But I will.
So they value education.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't know.
But I will tell you where it does come in, and I've got a proposal on my desk right now that we've got to figure out if it's something we can do. And that is, for example, with the sheriff's office, if they have folks that are certified with the SWAT team, or if they're certified with the dive team, same thing with the EMS or with fire, when they get these additional certifications that don't necessarily go directly to the job, but they certainly make us a better county for having them. So there's a lot of factors in there with those certifications.
So to that point, it actually expands the job. If you look at an officer that has no dive certification and you add it with an officer that has a dive certification, it means that officer can be an officer and that officer can be a diver, so it expanded the job.
It's true. I guess it's true.
That makes sense. That's my point. Yeah, that's good. If it adds value and capability to the job, great. The examples that I saw, I cited, it really did. Council Lang, you're up. You got a question?
I have a couple. What is our current education benefit for our employees?
We currently do not have anything that we offer to employees for furthering their education. Sending them to the self-development programs, assist them with any succession planning. But right now, if they were to enroll themselves in school to get their master's or bachelor's, there is no. The expectation is that they're coming in qualified for the role, but my purpose is to set them up for the next step.
So, I mean, I'm sure we have a lot of positions that don't require it.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing for those people to help them get a degree?
Great question.
It's not been something that we've traditionally offered. I think there's been one-off situations in the past where we have. We've had the reverse happen, where someone's gone out and earned it on their own, working for the county the whole time, but we haven't had a budget allocation that's allowed us to pay for education.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for a clarification?
He had a second question.
Okay.
And then the second question is, what type of leadership training do you provide for anybody in a leadership position? I mean, from manager all the way up to zero?
Yeah, the first step there would be anytime we have someone that we think is about to step into a supervisory role, or they're newly in a supervisory role and they need it. I'm looking at Ms. Fowler because she didn't go through the management training that we offered her back during COVID because they canceled it on her, and she's still got to do that. But through Appalachian Council of Governments, they have a program that we send our new supervisors and managers to, or our soon-to-be supervisors and managers. So that's something that a lot of folks in the county have been through. The South Carolina Association of Counties has what they call the Institute of Government, which I am a big believer in the Institute of Government and several of you have earned your level 1 certification or your level 2 certification. Mr. Garino has a level 2 certification from the SCAC. And then the newer add-ons are the National Association of Counties, the High Performance Leadership Academy. That is where we're very selective with 3 or 4 people from the county. I think Megan's been through that, where we're selective and we get a small cohort that goes through it each time. And that's a program that was designed in part by Colin Powell that I think has been very effective. Some of our leaders. In fact, as a result of the High Performance Leadership Academy, the first class that went through, I required them to do a project as a class. And the project they did was develop our internal leadership program, the LEAPS program, which is the last thing you see there, which is basically an opportunity for any of our workers after they have been deemed by their supervisors to be appropriate to go through a good class on team building, collaboration, email etiquette, things like that to really help them be more professional. And we're doing that internally. And we've gotten some notice about that, Mr. Lang. I just had an opportunity to do kind of a PSA for the High Performance Leadership Academy because we did that, a video PSA they recorded that I'm anxious to see how that turned out. But this is something that's we're feeling our way through a little bit. But I feel like we've got a deeper bench now because we're training people to step into leadership roles. Mr. Castle right there has been through it. You'll hear from him later. Mr. Robinson, you've been through there, haven't you? Yes, sir. Yes, and I know that Sam's been through it as well. So we feel like that's something that's new with the county over the last 2 or 3 years, but that we're making some good progress.
That is my experience in the Air Force. Giving some leadership training at low levels before people are actually in the role of being a leader is very important. Very important. I think it's something we can look at where when you're with the county for a certain amount of time at your certain level, you automatically go through beginner or basic leadership principles and things like that to get them where they're prepared so they can start thinking like that before they even considered for leadership positions. It works great in the military and it might be beneficial.
I think it's a good challenge. We could expand that to be something that's just an expectation. That's something I like that idea.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bowers.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I know at one time there was a governmental kind of tuition reimbursement repayment program, something if you work for a government job. Is that still a thing?
It's not anything that I can speak to. I don't know, Ralph, if you know any history on that.
Yeah, we did
Predates
that
me.
one time for several years until the recession came about in 2008. And that was one of the programs we had to put out to balance the budget.
I was thinking the state did something where if you work for that was just my question.
Councilor Wallace.
On the steps, is this a perpetual step thing, or is this to get us caught up and then be like performance based, or do you automatically get a raise no matter what?
It's longevity. It's a step. It's you one more year, you performed up to expectations, you earn that next step. And you're right, though, it's not directly merit based, other than you time experience and met expectations to stay. But it's not a merit-based raise system, and it's not a cost of living adjustment.
Would there be a situation where somebody was poorly performing that you would say, no, you don't get to move up to the next step?
Absolutely.
If you put someone that way.
So if you put someone back on probation, that's a probationary performance improvement plan, that could be one of the conditions that no, you don't take the next step now because of that. So you've got to be in good standing.
I guess I'm saying that could be an unintended consequence. I'm gonna get a raise anyway. I'll just show up for work.
Certainly don't want that culture.
No.
I agree with you.
Because we don't have merit-based raises.
Okay, we do not.
Any other questions or comments on this?
On the whole subject?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have 2 pleas. First, for what it's worth, I disagree with this idea that we shouldn't be encouraging further education. I would love for my child's PE teachers to have PhDs because then they've studied pedagogy. They know more how to deal with kids in classrooms and changing environments. I think encouraging education among all levels of our employees is valuable. So I just wanted to state that for what it's worth. Second, another thing, and y'all might have seen some emails from this that I was looking into, is the concept of paid family leave as an additional benefit. I saw in your report that the #1 request that employees had is more paid time off. I went to a national symposium in Minnesota on prenatal to 3 child development, and we spent 3 days talking about everything important to families and babies and mothers. At the end of it, somebody said they had all these researchers and workers from around the country, and they said, what's the #1 thing? If you could only do one thing to improve outcomes for babies and families for the rest of their lives, if there's only one thing of all the things we've been discussing for 3 days, what would you choose? And they said paid family leave for 6 weeks. That is the one policy with all the research behind it that makes the biggest difference in setting up mothers and babies and families overall. In 2022, the state gave paid family leave to every state employee signed under government master. And 1 year later, in 2023, we extended that to all teachers. So paid family leave is something that South Carolina has embraced and is working on. We had some confusing information go around in our emails today. Megan, I asked her help in trying to research counties that offer it. We're up to, I think, we found 4 counties that are offering paid family leave right now. The South Carolina Association of Counties is working with me on a survey that they're going to send to all counties. They're going to send to all counties to figure out which ones have paid family leave or are considering it right now. Because of the state having been a leader in this in 2022, more counties are looking forward at it. It has been linked with better employee retention, better families, better health for babies. I mean, it's just all around, I think, a really valuable benefit. And I know I asked for if we could price it out because I know we're going to be going into budget session. It's very hard to price out what it is to offer paid family leave. But I think it's something that we should be considering. It's in line with what our employees are requesting, which is more time off. If we do move to this idea of combining PTO, which is vacation and sick going together, then it even becomes more simplified because with paid family medical leave and the time you can use your PTO, they can help bank their time if they want to, but also know that somewhere between 3, 4, or 6 weeks, different counties, the state offers 6 weeks, some counties only offer 3, some offer more to the person who gives birth than to the other family members or adoption. There's a variety of ways you can approach it, but I think it's valuable for all sorts of reasons and something that our county should be among the at least 4 others, but other counties are moving.
Is that something that will be in the budget proposal?
We're not really sure how to, basically what we would have to do, and I leave it to these 2 more direct professionals on this point, we would have to just stick a number and see how we did. Because we don't know when those circumstances are going to occur. So that's, I think, part of what's the counselors asking is what other counties are doing this and how do they pay for it.
Yeah.
And so we're still trying to gather more information from that.
And as I said, SCAC is willing to do a survey. They're actually excited about this issue because they know it's coming forth and it's in their policy proposals. So I asked HR, I haven't heard back from y'all yet, but if SCAC is asking questions of other counties, they are looking to us, what would we like those questions to be? So we can send out a county survey to all the other HR reps in the county and ask. So they have a series of 4 questions they've already put together, and then they've asked me if our HR team has specific questions so we can just get better understanding of the ones who are offering it and the ones who are considering.
Yeah, I will say, without venturing into areas that we shouldn't necessarily, nothing too secret, but I will say our HR director was out this morning, ironically, with a family medical condition that has resolved itself, but that's why you're not getting a response.
Oh, no, that's fine. And I know it's
There was an irony there.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one other question.
Okay.
So one thing that I am curious about, so if I'm at a G7 now and I'm at the midpoint, so that would put me at 2660. If I get a promotion, let's say just going to a G8, do I go to the midpoint of G8 or do I start at the proposed minimum for G8?
Excellent.
That's a great question. So those scenarios have come up. And what we do is I review it with the manager and decide if it should go to the next step and what's going to incentivize this employee to move up to the next promoted position and what makes sense. Obviously, you don't want them to be demoted in pay and take a higher ranking position. So it's situational, but we do review those and determine what the best outcome is.
So when you say the best outcome, the best for the county or the best for the team member?
I would have to say both. It's definitely not something that we're gonna say, oh, we'll jump 3 or 4 steps ahead to give this employee an incentive. It has to make sense. And with that, I have to evaluate if there's other people in the same role, what are they making and how long have they been in that role? Is it gonna be fair to promote this person into that role and then making more than this individual? There's a lot of factors that go into that, but I'll be happy to.
So I guess what I'm asking is if I'm just a basic team member and I go into a supervisory role, is there potential that I would actually take a pay cut to get a promotion?
There's potential there for that, yes. If you're looking at the, if you're looking at the
They'll find a place in the scale.
That should
Yes.
never happen.
Don't think it would happen, because my recommendation is to move them to the appropriate step in that pay grade that would align with their associated pay. But there's room for that, but I would hope that would never.
Congratulations, you have more responsibility.
That's my.
Yeah.
Any other,
Does that sound right?
any other comments? Comments, questions?
I would just would say, Mr. Bowers asked about the benefits to the county or the employee. I would sometimes err on the benefit the employee, because you gotta have the employee, that employee is going to perform for you when you want it.
Next item up is gonna be 2C, which is the litter ordinance. I've looked at this a lot. The state has a state litter ordinance, which is 16-11-700. The county doesn't have a litter ordinance to speak of, from what I can tell. More
You have
people,
some very specific language, Mr. Chairman, in the solid waste part.
yeah. When more people come in here, there's more litter, and I think stronger enforcement will be part of the solution. That's what we're talking about tonight. I think we have 3 environmental officers now.
It's, one does code and then 2 litter officers.
And we have, so there's 2.
Yes, sir.
And they're both class 3 now. And they have a gun, they have a badge,
They pulled a couple people over this just in the last day or 2.
Yeah.
they can arrest people for littering and dumping.
Should introduce, we didn't, Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
Yeah, just
It's fine. Let you-
Okay, so know me, this is Austin Castle. He's our environmental enforcement manager and has been with the county since 2021 and with environmental enforcement from the beginning.
you have a proposal for this thing, I guess, huh?
And I'll let Ms. Fowler and Austin go through that. So, I know you may have some information that's confusing because the council considered this back in 2019, had first reading. A lot of that information is in your packet just to show you the last go round. But the environmental staff has some practical concerns that they brought Ms. Fowler on.
We had a meeting in 22 on it. I was here, I wasn't there in 19, so. There was a meeting in 2022.
Did we just rehash to 19?
I don't remember.
I don't either.
But I remember discussing it in 2022. Wasn't that long? You're up.
Sure. So just as an overview, like you mentioned, we don't have a litter ordinance. And so what we've done with our proposal is look through both the solid waste ordinance and the building codes ordinance, because a lot of what we write citations on are the codes found in both. So some of those are just litter focused, some of those are litter and code. So they're in 2 different locations. Really, it's up to y'all if we want to merge all these and make a litter ordinance, or if we just want to update existing. So that's why you see 2 different sections.
Well, 34 that you propose is a litter ordinance. Section 8 is codes. Yeah, so code is not on the agenda.
Some of those codes are litter related.
Oh, they are.
Yes, and so I think we just put them all in there so you could see everything that we would recommend including. And then where they go, we can figure out as we move through it, but we weren't sure what your priorities were on what needs to be included. And so we took what we had and just made some edits to that. So in article or chapter 34 for solid waste, it mentions that the recycling coordinator should be a county constable. We've never had our solid waste director be a constable, and so we suggest removing that. And then in 34-56, where it says that it should be under the supervision of the sheriff's office, we would propose that change to the environmental enforcement department to be over the litter laws and anti-litter programs. And then everything below that, so that Article 3 is new. So none of that exists in the code. Now we propose to add all of that to the solid waste ordinance. A lot of that came out of those discussions from 2019 and 2021 is where that information came from. And then the stuff that we added in green farther into the packet are the codes that our own environmental enforcement officers think need to be added somewhere, whether that's in the solid waste ordinance or in the building code side. These are the things that we get, I would say, the most comments on, which Austin can speak more on why we want those. But it's the complaints that we currently can't write citations on because we don't have them in our code now.
And what's that? Section 8 you're talking about?
Yes, I think that's where I ended up adding them in, all those in green, towards the end of your packet. So that's dealing with structures, junkyards, weeds, rodents, burning trash. Yeah. Vacant structures where we get both code and litter issues in those. Yeah, so some of them are strictly code, some strictly litter, but a lot of them just so it doesn't matter to us where they fall, just that we think that they should be included as codes that our officers can write on.
So to be clear, what y'all proposed, I think the chairman and I had the same confusion.
Yeah.
We had a litter ordinance draft for second reading in our packet. And that's the one from 2019, I'm told. And then we had proposed code changes. This proposed code changes supersedes that litter ordinance draft for second reading. Okay, so I don't even need to
We had
read.
not seen that until Megan shared it with me last week. So I did not know that.
I think what happened is the chairman was trying to get as much information as possible for this meeting. So he asked Megan to pull up the litter ordinance that was last considered, and it was from then. So as the chairman and I talked about coming in, we're at first reading on this stuff you have in front of you.
So we're starting over. We can ignore
That's right.
those. What we need to start is just with this proposed.
My advice to people here, focus on section 34, which is litter, which is the purpose. Now, the section 8 is not, in many ways, is not litter. And I've read the international code and all that. Big can of worms. I do not want to get into. So, for example, when they talk about section 8, they talk about unsafe equipment, including any boiler, heating equipment, elevator, moving. That's not what litter is about. This meeting's about litter.
But they needed 8 to be able to, my understanding, 8 is what gives any teeth to being able to say what a violation is. Right?
No, that's not true. 30. When you look at 34.
I'm going to just say what the penalties are.
Hold on. When you look at.
So this is not, what you have in front of you is not the full section.
Okay, so hold on. Let me finish.
This was just her.
When you look at 3486, 2 penalties and fines. This is a standalone ordinance, right? The litter, section 34. Is it not?
It's currently the solid waste ordinance. We just proposed adding.
Yeah, and it's entitling it litter. Okay. So my whole point is, section 8 goes into things way beyond litter. That may be something that you do at some point in the future. But I would rather just focus on this litter ordinance, which basically, somebody throw some trash on the ground. Not that somebody boil in their house isn't up to code. Different. That's section 8. That's a whole nother discussion.
Okay.
That's my,
For section 34, these 4 pages. This is what we currently have. You're just changing.
No, that's not the existing ordinance. That's what we would like to
everything
add
that
to
is
it or
just
change.
used. You're
Yes.
not just taking out language and changing it.
Right, the first 2 bullet points are just what we would change in the existing ordinance, and then everything beyond that is what we would add to it.
So you're striking out the
Right,
part.
right, add everything below that.
Yeah, so there's no other recommended change in the existing ordinance except those first 2.
And then all of this would be the first time that it's been written.
yeah, for section 34. So
Yes.
I'm gonna, I just have some questions. Let's focus on section 34. So my first question relates to, I know you've mirrored the state law. Tell by reading it, you're taking a lot from the state law, which is good. They need to be in line. Now, and then your first proposal, I like your long definition of litter. Now, this one, the definition in your second proposal is very short. You basically say it's, let me see. Definition of litter means all solid waste material which is not stored in a secure solid waste receptacle or which is not otherwise held or disposed in a manner consistent with local state law. So basically, if I throw an apple core on the road, your definition here calls that litter. Now, your initial definition in your first proposal was a lot clearer to the layman. I'm going to read it to you, and I'd like that to be.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say first proposal, what are you indicating? From 2019?
Yes. Okay, because I'm looking at.
That is, yeah, we didn't have that until last week. So that's not our proposal.
It's a predecessor to her.
Oh, yeah, not you personally.
Yeah.
Right, so,
Administration.
but
The
I'm saying,
administration
when
proposed in
we
2019.
developed this, it was completely separate from this.
The administration proposed in 2019, we talked about it in 2022. The definition of litter was this, which I prefer. I'm going to read, and I'm going to read it, and I'll tell you why. It says, litter means all discarded waste materials, including rubbish, garbage, trash, refuse, sand, gravel, yard clippings, limbs, leaves, slag, paper, plastic, rubber tires, waste, building materials, bottles, yada, yada, yada. Cigarette butts or filters, dead animals, or other materials of similar kind and description. Now, to me, that's a lot better than just saying everything is litter that I'm not allowed to throw in a receptacle. It spells it out to the person who knows that. So, for example, when I throw an apple core on the road, it's a violation under your proposal, but under my change, it would not be. Okay, that's the first point. So I'd like to change that, and I'm not going to make a motion, but that's my first point. My second thing is, when you look at the state law, and your proposal is very good here. It's simple, it's straightforward, it reflects the state law, but it varies in one critical aspect. Now, when you read, so for example, if I'm on my property and I throw a candy bar wrapper on my property, under your proposal, that's littering. Under the state law, it's not littering. And I'll tell you why, because there's an important phrase in the state law that I'm going to read to you that we need to put in ours. I'll read it. The state law in the county proposal basically says this: no person shall dump, drop, deposit, discard, or otherwise dispose of litter or other solid waste upon any public or private property in the county or in the waters of the county, whether from a vehicle or otherwise. Basically, both your proposal and the state law saying that. The state adds this: for which he is not the owner or person otherwise granted permission by you. I would like to add that, because if I throw, I don't smoke, but if one of my guests throws a cigarette butt on my lawn and has permission, under the state law, it's not a violation. Under the administration proposal, it is. And I want to stay away from people littering their own property. What I'd like to do is go back to some of the things in here at some point in the future, and particularly trash in the yard, junk in the yard, abandoned vehicles, vegetation. Those 4 things are the number 1 things we get complaints about. That's a whole different thing besides litter. And they're scattered in our ordinance. They all need to be put in one place, like you're trying to do here. I agree with this. This goes way too far, but I agree with this. So I don't want to try to get the owner caught in the litter ordinance, snagged in the litter ordinance, when there's all this stuff, if it's not, if it's 1,000 cigarettes and then piles of trash, then sure, he's violating. But if I throw a cigarette butt on the street, that's a violation. But if I do it on my own property, it's not. It just becomes excessive on my own property. It becomes a problem, in my vision. Do people understand what I'm saying?
Mr. Chairman, just to point, if there's a state law that says that, and it's been a while since I've read the state law, does the state law not supersede whatever we write anyway?
But then in that case, now here's the question. If the state law is there, why do we need a county?
So looking at Mr. Hendricks, depends on who's charging him where.
That's right. And our county officers they don't believe that they have the authority to make charges without our ordinance. So they have somebody littering, they say, we don't have an ordinance, we can't charge. That's why we need to do it.
So, Mr. Hendricks, to my first question, if there's a state law, why can our officers not enforce the state law?
Well, our sheriff's officers obviously can, but I don't think our departmental officers believe they can.
Well, so, Mr. Hendricks, I'm going to ask the question again. If they're class 3 officers, why can they not enforce the state law?
I think they can enforce the state law. But they don't have anything to point to that says that they can't.
Well, we can't.
But
The litter officers can
Class
now,
three
they are
officers.
class 3 certified by South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. Before, a week ago, we didn't have that. So we were basically 3 code officers. That we couldn't use any of these state charges.
So that's a good answer to the question is, say the guy on the left retires, we hire somebody else. We don't have a county code, he doesn't have anything to do until he gets a certification.
I agree. No, I agree. I think you need it.
And to add to
That's very
that,
good.
we do have state tickets now. We have blue state tickets. Now we can write another thing we can add to that is community service. That's another big thing that I've noticed people around the county complaining about was, lack of inmate cleanup. And I've talked with Kevin Durham. He's going to try to get inmates, but all those right now are allocated. So there's a certain amount they have to have here and everywhere else. So he is working on a process where we can get inmates back. But for now, having these state tickets and being able to put community service, pick it up, that's an added thing that we can, along with fines, which is something that our litter officers just did. They've already been active about it. Somebody dumped 350 pounds of trash last Thursday, and on Friday, now that we are class 3 certified, we can obtain warrants from the magistrate's office. If we find somebody's name, once they're to the trash, they can go get them, but they were written $1,000 ticket and they were made to clean up. So
The state law, to me, when it looks at the penalties, is a lot more detailed, So you have this way you'll have, if you're class 3, you'll have an option for either, which is good. They need the tools. Or if you're not class 3, then you'll be able to use the local ordinance. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
That's a good question. Chris?
I go back to your question to you. Don't feel like and can is two sets. It's like shall and should.
That's right. And the answer is that I believe they can as soon as they get that certification. They can write a ticket on the state.
Class 3.
yes, sir.
Yes, on the state code.
What Mr. Hendricks is speaking to is a situation before they had the class 3 and they didn't feel like they could.
Right.
But we are class 3
They
now.
are
so
now,
we
as a week
can.
ago, but I don't even know if he knew that.
But I knew they were.
I'm just trying to, it's like, why do we need the county ordinance if there's a state ordinance that you guys can operate on?
Well, and I will point out, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Lawless, the penalties. Once we get where we want to be, I'm going to certainly be looking at those closely to make sure that our penalties aren't in conflict with state laws. So we have a conflict of laws where we can't do what we want. One of the things that was setting out the penalties in the package that we got was need some work. It has 3 different things that can be done, and I think the judge should be allowed the opportunity to do whatever he wants to do. I mean, if it's more stringent, if it's a worse offense, he needs to be able to do a stronger penalty. And what was in here was not very good. So we need to look at what state penalties are and the county penalties are and make sure there's not a conflict there. So I will be working on that.
It seemed like it was pretty generic, our stuff. We just kind of threw it to the magistrate with a big van. The
That's
state is real specific.
And there was also a provision, if somebody couldn't pick up the litter, that they could come up with some other duty that that the judge supervised. And I thought that was kind of.
Mr. Chairman, just for the sake of continuity and clarity, would it not make sense for a county ordinance just to mimic or mirror the state law when it comes to litter?
The first proposal did. It was pretty much, the proposal from 2019 to 2020 pretty much mirrored it. Now, it didn't pass. And I remember complaining because it was the owner would be litter on his own property. We could, but you could go either way. This way you'd have two choices. You know, if you wanted to go to the magistrate and say, okay, you know, you had the magistrate would have a choice. I think it's $100 to $500 jail or community service. This way the magistrate could just say, you know, this person's capabilities, you know, community service. Where the state law, pretty much you're locked in. It lays out the penalties, right? Pretty clearly. So it gives them more.
On a legal thing, excuse me, is the state law not the master law? How's that work?
Well,
How
the
can we-
Constitution is the master law.
You know what I mean?
Well, I do, and there are conflict of laws that you have to look at and see how it is. I mean, the county can pass a litter ordinance. I mean, we are able to do that, but we can't conflict with the state law and say, no, we're not going to do what we do in South Carolina.
Someday, there may be a circumstance, and I can say this as being a former prosecutor, it will happen, because it happened. I dealt with things like this. I'm sure they still deal with this in court, where the guy says, I ain't pleading, I'll go to trial. And the officer or the prosecutor says, look, we'll tear up the state ticket and write you into the county ordinance. All right, well, I'll plead that. Because it's not going to look the same on the rap sheet. It's not going to carry potentially the same. You think about it if y'all were in an executive session looking at a potential board person and they said, oh, no, they got popped under the state law for $5,000 on an illegal dumping as opposed to, oh, it was a littering ticket from Kershaw County. You know, you would look at that differently. So it gives them some options to negotiate with, to figure out which charge. Do they really want to go hard or do they want to take it easy? So there is a value to it as a former prosecutor that I could see.
Would there be a situation where you would get somebody with both laws?
There could be. There absolutely could be. It could be that, okay, you threw that out, that qualifies for state, but we're also going to write a county ticket too in case the prosecutor's office throws out a state ticket. We'll still have the county ticket we can go forward. City lease.
That's problematic, potentially.
It could have, well, that happens. That does happen. But I would say that that's a problem with you like that talking about it. But that's a problem with the prosecutorial body, not the law. A good prosecutorial body will use that in the right circumstance. A bad body, a bad town, or a bad prosecutor in big court would use that as just a way to grind you. But that doesn't mean the underlying law.
Elaine, good question.
Yeah, it's my understanding, kind of what Mr. Brown was asking, which takes precedence. The county can make a state law more stringent, but not less. I mean, they cannot take away from state law. The state law says you have to pay a $100 fine. The county couldn't come and say, well, it's only a 50. If the state law says.
But it's not as straightforward as that. But in essence, yes, you can't supersede a state law. In other words, you can say if you're and I believe this council debated before about whether you had a candy wrapper that flew over into somebody's yard. That's why it didn't pass last time with this council, because we were worried about the definition of litter. So if the definition of litter under the state law says if you throw a brick on the ground in South Carolina, that is illegal. You cannot then say, no, that is legal in Pickens County. So it's different.
Okay, so my question for you, how do you feel about the more specific definition of litter? Okay. The second thing is, are you okay? You okay with exempting the owners from littering on their own property through this ordinance?
How often is that something to do?
It kind of goes back to the conversation about you have where it's one cigarette butt versus a pile of them. We have the county ordinances on the code enforcement side, where if they have a pile of cigarette butts in their yard, it's just a problem for everybody. We can use the ordinance to code, the building code side for something, for a situation like that. So I would be.
I actually prefer this staff's newer definition of litter because it is vague. All solid waste material that's not stored in a secure receptacle or otherwise not held in a manner consistent. Because taking the time to like spell out cigarette butts or filters, or what about vapes? If you've done a litter cleanup, right? But I don't know. I feel like
if I throw my apple core on the road, I don't believe I'm littering. Under that ordinance, I am. If I get an old flower and throw it, am I littering?
I'd rather you get pulled over for throwing out an apple core because then maybe it'll keep you from throwing out a fast food what everyone else is doing. And I don't understand how this that says discarded waste materials, you think an apple core is okay, but this that says solid waste material not a receptacle means it allowed. Or I don't understand why you think it's bad in one.
Well, because it doesn't. In my definition, it doesn't name apple core here. It says other materials of similar kind and description. Now, do you think an apple core is like a type?
Are you looking at this one?
Well, no. That's the one the definition I don't like. I like the definition in the first proposal.
That doesn't really, all discarded waste material, including the
No, this is the proposal from 2019. This is the one from 2019 right here. Right here.
Right, the litter means all discarded materials, including.
Nope. Have you seen that?
That's this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I don't, to me, going vague gives you more freedom to, who knows what people are going to throw out. Whereas this takes the time to spell all this stuff as and then says, or other things.
And well, it's stuff that's similar. So I would argue, if I'm sitting there and I throw an apple core out my window and they get pulled over and they want to hit me with a fine of $100, I want to say, well, it's not really similar to these items. The judge would agree with me. Now, in your case, it's anything you can't throw illegally in a trash can. Anything.
I think apple core is similar to rubbish, garbage, trash, and refuse.
Waste by definition.
Yeah.
Not to a rapid.
I know, I don't. I do have another thing I want to point out. So I'm just saying, I like the more vague one.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to ask is about littering in the lake. This is relevant because I'm going to announce later that Pickens County is now going to be participating in a very large Lake Hartwell litter cleanup event. So this says the definition of the second is littering or is within the jurisdictional boundaries of Pickens County. Is there a way that it could be like not just within, but affecting? Because like if you're dumping in Lake Hartwell and it's piling up on the shores of Mile Creek Park, can we get you like, and then you pull your boat in? I know it's really hard. It's core property. I get that.
It's an interesting point.
But the lakes and the creeks.
Who's going to arrest? Are we going to travel to Oconee County and arrest people to litter, or is Oconee County going to deliver with the cigarette butts that floated up there? The jurisdiction is where the property is. Although one of these litter ordinances I read talked about the litter moving by force of effect or force of nature is what I thought it was.
So if you throw it through the air and it floats a little, is that like it floating through the water? These are questions that juries get to decide.
Right, I don't know. But there are people who dump in the lake big time. And I realize that's core, but our core is not large enough that there are people, I mean, I know there's like one little core police guy that I see periodically.
Well, and Kiwi it's not.
And Kiwi's not the core, right. But if our officers see a boat out dumping, can we just make a phrase that says waterways or shorelines or something that would, I'm adding work to it, but I just mean.
Sorry, because you're talking about jurisdiction here.
Yeah.
Why don't you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I could put them all
This is
together.
the first reading.
With the DNR not being involved at that point.
DNR would, but if they're not there,
If
that's
you
our question. But you're right, DNR
You're
would
asking
be.
about who's witnessing.
Yeah, or like, so what if I complain? I've seen a boat twice dumping trash. Who do I call to complain to that to?
Where they dump.
Yeah, but if they're done, like, if there's a whole bunch of Clemson that are right on Lake Hartwell. you would see them dropping it in Lake Hartwell, and that's gonna affect the shores of Clemson.
So,
Can I call?
Mr. Chairman, if we go back to the 2019 version, 34.5A directly addresses that. I think that you were on the right page. I agree that the codes enforcement piece is important, but I think having a litter ordinance and having codes enforcement as being separate items is probably the cleanest way to do it, in my personal opinion.
We'll get to it.
Yeah, they're good. It says waters of the county.
All right, so I'm gonna make two motions. So my motion is to change the definition of litter. This word for word. All discarded waste materials, including rubbish, garbage, trash, refuse, sand, gravel, yard clippings, limbs, leaves, slag, paper, plastic, rubber, tires, waste, building materials, bottles, glass, aluminum cans, cigarette butts, and/or filters, and animals, or other materials of similar kind and description. That's the new definition that I'd like to proposal. This is just gonna be a draft. It's not gonna be first reading. It's only a draft. Do I hear a second?
Second that.
Any discussion on that?
I still prefer the one that's more open-ended.
I understand. Any other questions? Those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed, same sign. It passes 5-1. Okay, my next motion is gonna be taking 34-85 in your proposal, item 1. After the words county, waters of the county, whether from a vehicle or otherwise. It's the same thing in the state law. I'm going to add these words. For which he is not the owner or a person otherwise granted permission by the owner. If you look at 16-11-707, right at that point. That's my motion. So it's going to exempt the owner from litter laws, but he still has to deal with 1076, which is trash in yard, it's junk in yard, which we'll circle right back to it. That's my motion. Any second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, does everybody understand what I'm doing?
Protected by the
Failure?
Semi.
You say, okay, so for example, the way the proposal's written now, if I'm on my property, if I throw a wrapper on my property, my neighbor could say, I don't like Alex, he just littered in his lawn, the wrapper's still there, calls him up, he comes in, he looks at their ordinance, and says, guess what, that's litter, cites him. He's throwing a cigarette butt over his porch. He saw it, he goes out, sees the cigarette butt, it's on my property, I get a citation. Now, under this proposal and under the state law, he's exempt from that. Can't happen. But what happens is if there's lots of junk in his property, there's trash bags, it starts to pile up, there's junk in the yard, there's abandoned vehicles. He's gonna get a complaint, he's gonna go to 1076, I think it is, and he's gonna enforce it down. So if it becomes excessive on the owner's property, then they get caught, not in the litter ordinance, but the junk and the trash.
That makes sense. I guess my only concern is the old adage, one man's junk is another man's treasure. There's an unwritten rule in the South, at least stay out of my business. I have an individual in our area who has some old junk cars. He loves them. And they're deteriorating, so what do you do?
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
Believe me, we're gonna get there.
Chair, Councilman, I was waiting concerns. You got, this could be a slippery slope. And what you're trying to accomplish right now is coming up with another document for them to bring back to us for us to look at. You're not.
You mean on this litter, on the litter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Building codes out of the picture.
Yeah, totally.
This is your litter.
634. Come with those two changes.
And all you're doing, they're gonna bring something back. You're just putting the groundwork down for what you're looking for.
First read. Any other questions?
We're not passing anything.
No, just first reading. No, not first reading, just draft for first reading on April 2nd. Any other comments on that? So I'm going to add the language that those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed, same sign. Passes 6. Okay, let me just explain one thing. We're a little ahead of schedule. I want to explain one thing that really will help everybody put this into context. I talked to Ken about it maybe about 6 months ago. When it comes to things like this, there's two principles that are clashing right here. The principle is it's my property, I can do what I want. And the other principle is my neighbor, I'm affecting my neighbor's property by what I'm doing to my property and hurting his property. Those are the two things that clash. Now, how far does the government go dealing with that? There's 4 different things the government can do. First thing is option 1, the government stops at the property line. You're saying, at the property line, if your neighbor wants to put a toilet bowl on his rooftop, it's his property, he can do what he wants. That's option 1. The county does not go on their property at all. Option number 2, the county reaches beyond the property line, but only in the yard. Trash in the yard, junk in the yard, then vehicles in the yard, vegetation. That's kind of where we're at now. County government. Third option, county reaches further and says they touch the house. The house is abandoned, half one wall is falling down, roof is caved in. We have no ordinance. We have nothing.
Right.
And that's it. If county wanted to go further, they could do that. That would be the next step of the county reaching over into that property. Fourth option is the county or the government goes into the house. They don't like the way this is functioning. They don't like that about the house. That's extreme. That's an extreme part of the spectrum. So you have that spectrum. The county stops at the property line, the county ends up in the house. So right now, the way we are when it comes to the ordinance he's speaking of, the county government goes into the yard only, doesn't touch the house, doesn't go in the house unless it's a tenant. Right?
Right. It's a tenant's situation.
Different. It's a private owner. Go in the house, they don't touch that property. Now, as more people come to this county and they're living closer and closer together, there's more pressure on us to go further. That abandoned house next to me, that mobile home that's half torn down, we can't do anything about that. That's an eyesore. There's no ordinance to get at. Now, so you have to keep that in mind. How far do you want to go? Now, that's why I didn't want to go into Section 8, because Section 8 is that whole spectrum. We have to decide where we're going to fall as a council before we even consider ordinances. Litter is totally unrelated. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, next item up is 2D. It's sewer plant discussion. Thank you very much. So we'll be looking forward to your first reading draft. Sewer plant discussion, Mr. Roper.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Rodney Robinson, our Public Works Director, to join me if he would. And he's going to keep me honest on numbers. I think he's been in communication today with our Public Service Commission Director, Clint Dickey, who oddly enough, given our earlier conversation, is off doing continuing education tonight. So the Public Service Commission Director can't be with us. But before we start this, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put a frame around this. I'm not going to ask you for any action tonight. That would be unfair to, and I'll step through the timeline right now. So, but I have found, and I can only speak for myself, I'm not going to speak for Director Robinson here, but I have found that this sewer situation in Pickens County is one of, if not the most complex issues in county government. And so I didn't want to throw some stuff in your packet and expect you to master it and give me a vote tonight on something that, frankly, I have to dust off this old 1998 ordinance every time an issue comes up. So I want you to take this as an opportunity to ask questions, for us to all get a common knowledge base. I know some of you went on a field trip with me over the last couple of years. There's been 2 different field trips where you've got to walk around in one of the sewer plants, at least one, and that's interesting. But the real reason we're here tonight is because in January 28th of this year, the Public Service Commission, which is a body you all appoint. It serves in different capacities. It helps with the formation of the budget. It makes advisory comments. 5-1, they passed a recommendation to you all that we expand the middle wastewater treatment plant from its current 1 million gallon per day limit to a 3 million gallon per day plant. That passed 5-1. It says 6-1 here, but I heard it was 5. Anyway, it was the chairman, Mr. Tate, voted against that recommendation. That recommendation came about because the town of Central came to the Public Service Commission and asked them for that recommendation. Nothing wrong with them doing that. They asked. And the Public Service Commission made it. That's what got us here. So that was just a few weeks ago that happened. We've been waiting on a couple of pieces of data before we talk to you in any detail about what we would like to happen now. One is, if you look on this map, you see this wastewater treatment plant here, which is a 60,000 gallon per day wastewater treatment plant. That is at the old stockade. It's at the animal shelter on County Farm Road. That location, basically during Hurricane Helene, the entire plant floated and moved. And we're having to have this pumped out every day for the septage that comes from the animal shelter and from roads and bridges and public works, which are located there. That wastewater treatment plant was designed to handle a small prison. So it's bigger than what we need now, which is an odd, nice way to feel about a sewer plant, right? Usually they're needing to be expanded right now. But we've asked for recommendations from our engineers and a recommendation to bring to you all. We got that. Right.
What's that one called?
We call it the stockade.
That's the stockade.
Stockade. We got that Friday. So I didn't want to give that to you over the weekend or today by email and say, hey, we need to know what to do about this. Wouldn't be fair to you. But I will tell you, we're going to, in the coming days, send you some information about 4 different options that they've given us, where we'll use a combination of FEMA money for reimbursement from Helene and insurance proceeds from our liability carrier to get this back working. And we need to get it back working because long-term, medium-term, we want to expand our operations on County Farm Road. We've talked openly, I think, and the chairman's been with me. You all have talked with me about it. We need to get out of our property on Walhalla Highway, the old Jeep Hinkle dealership that the county's used since 2002 in different capacities. So the idea that we have that we're going to bring to you as time goes by is to consolidate our operations on County Farm Road so that we're not maintaining multiple buildings in multiple locations, driving things between them all the time. But so we've got a proposal. We've got it Friday. Our challenge as a staff is to figure out which proposal we can get back to you that will be paid for by a combination of FEMA and insurance reimbursement. So look for that coming in the next few weeks as we work on that. That's the damage done by Helene to the stockade. Okay. The other thing we have to orient you is just below the airport, Mr. Lang's district, off of Campground Road, there is the Roper wastewater treatment plant, which I've made that joke before. I won't keep making it, but this is the only thing in Pickens County named after a Roper. The Roper wastewater treatment plant, the property there was bought from a Roper family. I don't think they made it part of the contract. You have to always call it that. That's what they call it. They call it the Roper plant. The Roper plant is a 500,000 gallons per day plant. It serves mainly this part of Liberty. And during Hurricane Helene, the Roper plant has a feature that it makes it unique. The Roper plant has a detention basin. So something like 700,000 gallons entered that plant during the peak of Helene. It's only permitted and designed to handle 500,000. That detention basin caught that extra septage and allowed it, that extra waste, and allowed it to enter the plant at a flow that the plant could handle. And Roper came through with flying colors, never violated any permit amount. It's not even close to our newest plant, but it had that feature that made it more resilient. There's also a plant in Katichi that many of you have seen. That's a plant we inherited. It's a 40,000 gallon a day plant that just serves that little milk. So that one, the county has been operating and has had some upgrades, and it's really not relevant for our conversation. It's fine. Central North, which was put in, I think, to serve mainly Daniel High School, the new Daniel High School, and some other things in that area. It's a 300 gallon per day plant, and 300,000 gallon per day plant, and it is doesn't have capacity issues. It's okay with its capacity for now, and really not the source of tonight's conversation. The same is true for the upper wastewater treatment plant, which is where the headquarters, this is the one you all went through the last time. The upper plant has room for expansion. You see in the footprint there, and you'll recall it has that flat field next to it. But it's also serving mainly Liberty below the railroad tracks. And it's got plenty of capacity. It's not even halfway to its capacity limits. So we're not as worried about that one, although when it rains hard, like it did Helene, it knocks the top off of the 1 million gallons per day limit, because the city of Liberty, our hometown, has a huge I&I problem. I&I being influx and infiltration of rainwater into the septic system, not septic, the sewer system. Liberty has struggled with that for a generation. They will struggle probably with it for a generation more, at least. They're not going to fix that problem. It is pervasive throughout their entire system. So when it rains hard, the 18 mile, which has the upper plant, which has all sorts of capacity, it still hits its limit. So you're going to see coming from us, let's do what Roper has there. Let's build a detention basin to make it more resilient, even though Liberty is going to have that I&I problem. In a way, you might be worried about the lack of moral hazard here. Well, will Liberty ever fix their problem if we build a county facility that handles, and the answer to that is they're not going to fix it either way. It's too pervasive. We have got to worry about that, or else if we have a big rain event and DES asks us to sample the next day, guess what? We're going to be building a new plant. So I can tell you for 20 years, Liberty's been talking about the I&I problem. We just need to accept it as a given. We're going to bring you a recommendation, which I now have. Got it Friday afternoon, so I'm not going to try to force this on you either, about how we would pay for it, and what we would like for you to consider to do to make that plant more resilient for years to come. Now, the plant that is mostly at issue, I've said the last, and that is the middle plant. That's the one that the Public Service Commission has asked you all to expand. I can tell you that we have done some good work over the last 2 or 3 years with the middle plant. You've probably seen media reports about Central being out of sewer capacity, Clemson being out of sewer capacity, easily combined being very stressed in their sewer capacity. The middle wastewater treatment plant still has capacity. We've set aside 75,000 gallons a day, just set it aside for what may come one day on Big Dog. That's what would service Big Dog. So we pulled that off the table. We have the other things where people have already paid availability fees. We've already reserved capacity in that plant. And we know that that amount runs up 700,000, 800,000 gallons per day. But when we actually watch the flow that comes through that plant, it's 350,000 gallons a day. So this is a recommendation that came from Clint Dickey to me a couple of years ago. He went back to DHEC and he had them true up the checkbook, so to speak. And DHEC gave us back 270,000 gallons a day in capacity. So there's still capacity in this plant. There is not capacity in this plant to annex into a town limit or for us to put subdivisions for the whole southern part of the county. There isn't. And that's what Central wants to do by going to a 3 million gallon per day. Because then you could put huge development down here, and if they wanted to, if you all wanted to, you could do that. But the middle plant would benefit under any analysis from the Roper detention also, because Central has INO. So we're going to bring you a proposal on that. There are options, and we will bring these to you for you to look at, to expand middle wastewater treatment plant from 1 million to 2 million, from 1 million to 3 million. And I will tell you, it costs significantly more than building an EMS station. All right? It's not inexpensive. We were smart a couple of years ago. When I say we, county staff was smart a couple of years ago, anticipating what we were seeing with growth, knowing that council was about to go into a moratorium, about to study the UDSO. The county has been very judicious with how we allocated capacity in the last couple of years. Where other people during the huge ramp up in growth in Pickens County has been selling capacity and they've reached their maximum, other municipalities or other municipal-like entities like easily combined, Pickens County has not been doing that. So we have the ability right now to make decisions on our sewer capacity, not in a mandated situation. Because as you may have heard, if you get up to 80% of your permitted capacity, 85% of your permitted capacity, DHEC, DES will then make you build an expansion. We're not there. We've got time to figure out what we want to do, particularly if we make these facilities more resilient the way Roper was. So look for us to bring you information in the coming days and weeks about that as well. There are layers to this onion, and I don't want to characterize what Central wants or what Clemson wants. I'm not informed enough to tell you all what they want, but I will tell you that under our agreement with the way that we fund sewer, there's a particular problem. And before I describe that problem, let me take one step back. How many of you have gotten a call from someone who got their tax bill and said, why do I have a sewer charge on my tax bill? I'm on a septic tank. I mean, if you hadn't, you're gonna. That's gonna happen. Well, the truth of the matter is there's two answers to that question. One is South Carolina Supreme Court has said, and Mr. Hendricks can get you this information, that sanitary sewer systems are a public benefit to the entire community. So it doesn't matter if you live in Clemson or Dacusville or wherever, knowing that your waterways are not being filled up with sewage is a public benefit. And so that's answer one. Answer two is the main reason these plants got built was to help with economic development along the 123 corridor. So Pickens County Commerce Park is a huge user of the upper plant. And that's why it was there. So the entire community benefits through the tax base, through the jobs availability of the Commerce Park. So there are two instances. That's why that bill shows up. But you will get that call every year. We get that call every year. And it usually takes, sometimes they're funnier than others. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I paid my sewer fee, so come hook me up. Yeah, some people will do a better job than others with how they present it to us. But in the unincorporated parts of Pickens County, you have sewer millage, 1.1 mils on your last tax bill. Just over a mil goes towards funding our sewer plants. That's because of an idiosyncrasy in state law that I can't speak to, but it doesn't allow us to provide sewer system in a place that already has sewer system. So you can't levy a millage on the people in Easley. they already have a sewer system from easily combined. So it's just the unincorporated areas. But our two biggest customers are Liberty and Central. They pay a fee to be involved. They pay a rate.
They being the city or
The two cities, that they pass it on to their taxpayers. Yeah.
The users pay.
The users pay through the city. So we contract with the city. And that's when you hear people talk about the IGA. And that's what this is. This is the IGA. This one goes back to 2005. This is what's called the new IGA. It goes back to 2005. The older one goes older than that. Yes.
So this was my first question, but you basically just answered. So the county makes the investments in these plants.
Yes.
And then what it does, that's capital and operation, right? So the county's investing that money. They issue bonds, whatever. They pass those costs on to the users. And they pay most all those costs, except for what shows up on the property tax bill. Is that correct?
Yes, with qualification.
Okay.
The qualification is the allocation of the cost to operate the plant and the capital expenditures is set out in this agreement.
I know that, right?
Right. So Pickens County has 63.66% of the allocation. Town of Liberty, or the town of Central has 21.38%, and the city of Liberty has 14.96%. So when it comes, if there's a bill that comes to you for $1, Liberty pays 15 cents. Is basically the way that works.
So the 63 cents that the county government pays is paid through that millage?
It's paid through the millage. That's correct. It's paid through the millage.
But the only people paying the millage are county residents. Sorry.
That's right.
But aren't there people that are not in Liberty and not in Central that are using those plants? Do they pay a fee?
You mean the plants themselves? They play. So let's.
No. For example, let's say somebody lives just outside of Liberty. And they're on the sewer system.
Yeah.
Are they paying a fee in addition to the property
In
tax?
some cases, they're going to pay the rate.
They're going to pay the rate.
They're going to pay the rate. That's right. Because
They're going to pay the rate, but they're also going to pay the property tax too?
That's correct. Because they're out in the unincorporated area. But those folks, it's a side note, but think about how are you going to figure out somebody's sewer rate? You're going to have to read their water meter. We don't have any water meters. So we have to have a city help us with that part of it. The city has to read the meter so we know how to charge the city. I don't know how you turn somebody's sewer service off. That's a different question, right? That being said, the IGA, the intergovernmental agreement between us and Central, provides a mechanism for a city to request we expand our plant. And the mechanism is very straightforward. It says it's the sole way that it can happen. The city can give you 3 years' notice that you need to expand. And if they do, you have to expand.
You have to?
You have to. But they have to pay 90% of the cost. The other two participating entities pay 5% each. So the reason no one is demanding that we expand is because Liberty or Central, if they did, would be on the hook for 90%. Now, Central might be able to afford 90% if they had a developer willing to pay the expenses in a tax increment financing deal. Does this start to seem circular to you?
I was waiting when you're going to come in.
Yes. So Central could demand, and we would have to, under the agreement, comply. If Central could pay 90% of the fee, which would be $20 million. I'm just making a number up. It would be in that ballpark. The only way that could happen under this agreement, there might be a bigger deal somewhere else. But under this agreement, it would be for Central to be able to raise that 90% of that cost. So instead, what they would like for us to do, and I don't blame them, I would do the same thing, is to get our Public Service Commission to recommend to us that we just do it. Right? That makes sense. That's good. That's smart business. That's them having a good administrator, right? Who's thinking with his brain. That being said, Mr. Sager, I think before we move on, you've got a question.
Yeah, so when you look at the reserved amount, so like the seller's us, the purchaser is whoever. It gives each reserved amount of capacity. Is that the reserved amount of the entire system, or is it for particular plants?
Well, so Liberty is more concerned about the capacity in the one they can drain to, which is ours. Okay,
So they have a reserved amount for each plant?
yes,
Oh, okay, it's for each plant.
yes.
It's not overall.
So, I mean, that may be a gross oversimplification.
So let's say
Liberty can't get their septic.
okay, so
Get
let's
their
say
sewage down.
let's say it's the middle plant, it's $1 million, 1 million capacity.
Right.
1 million gallons a day, right? Now, what is the capacity for each entity of that plant?
I can tell you, and Rodney, you may have to correct me because I may get this part wrong, but we were up to 727,000 gallons per day that was committed. Not necessarily flowing through the plant, but committed. That means people were telling us they paid the fee to reserve space for this subdivision to come online, whatever. After we trued up with the real flows, there was 178,000 gallons per day that belonged to Central. And we had 100,000 that we still had uncommitted, in addition to the 75,000 that we set aside for Big Dog. I know that gets.
So you're saying that was that was still not used?
That's not used. Right. So that's the reason we're not in a position where DHEC is going to make us start engineering an improvement here. Although that could come in the next few years.
Okay, so that's about 250,000. That's below the 80%.
Right.
75%.
Right.
Okay, so back to my question. So when you look at the middle plant, what is the reserve capacity for Liberty, Central, and the county?
I apologize. I'll make sure.
When you look at the middle plant, what is the reserve capacity? Central, Liberty, and the county.
Right.
You know.
So we'll really need Mr. Dickey to give us those exact numbers. We'll email those to you as soon as we have them. He was out of town.
Okay.
So I'm giving you round numbers right now. I can tell you that Liberty's got plenty of capacity. Central has almost none left, and the county has some. So to the extent that those numbers
So
help,
you don't know how much Central's reserve is? 600,000 gallons?
no, they don't have anywhere close to that.
Okay.
And Clemson, I don't know if you recall, but a year and a half ago or something, City of Clemson came and said, we fund a study to look at capacity for the middle plant. And they got an IGA with Liberty and Central, since they all share that capacity, to look into how much capacity do we need and who should pay for it. Once Clemson realized they were not going to be annexing their Plant 23 and needing access to the plant, they decided they no longer wanted to pay for the study, understandably. So there is no study. We thought it was going to happen a year ago, but there isn't a study now that's going to answer exactly what your question was. What's the reserve? How much capacity? How much do they think they need? How should it be divided?
So we updated that as of Friday.
Oh.
Because once we learned that Clemson wasn't going to move forward, we said, well, we still need this study done on the middle plant anyway.
Okay.
And so we kept going.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
we got the results of that on Friday. I can tell you, we need to go back with them with a few things. I think there's, we just got a draft in our email box on Friday. Before we're ready to put that out, we need to make sure that their numbers are all right.
Who paid for that study?
We did.
So Clemson is going to pay for it. They backed out the county.
We paid for it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
you said 85, once you get to 85%, Department of whatever
Department of whatever, thank you.
makes
Yeah.
you pay,
Yes.
makes you expand, right?
Yes.
At 85%. So I'm curious as to, do we call that 85% zero? Do we call 84% zero, or do we call 100% zero?
We call 100% zero.
So, Mr. Chairman, would it not make sense for us to call 84.9% zero to make sure we don't cross that threshold where our hand's not forced by the state to make a huge whatever? And I'm going somewhere with this, so if you'll bear with me, I'm going to stay true to our agenda so that I don't get in trouble. But when I think about annexation, and I think about all things annexation, if Central wants to annex, or if Liberty wants to annex, you just said you just said Central and Liberty both have an I&I problem. And we have nothing in our toolbox to make them do anything to fix the I&I problem. What if the tool in the toolbox is, if you want to annex something, you're going to have capacity, so either you're going to pay for it are you gonna fix your I&I in order to get your flow? Because we're losing flow with I&I. So would it not make sense, and I agree, we've got to look at expanding our plants and all the things, that's long-term stuff. But in the short term, to stop annexation and to force their hand to fix the I&I, is that not a tool or an avenue that we could use?
Okay. It's hard to tell. See, I'm a numbers guy, so without knowing the numbers of how much each reserve is, how close they are. And then there's something called available capacity, which is what we set aside that they can buy into. I'd like to know what those numbers are. Now, back to your point, just one more time. It's 3 different items.
It was. My point was, is rather than getting to 85.1%, the state's saying you got to expand your plant, we call 84.9% capacity is zero.
Yeah.
But, okay, that's point number one. Point number two is we force Liberty and Central's hand to fix their I&I problem. If they want to gain capacity in your I&I. Whatever that looks like, because we have no way to get them to fix their system currently. And then if there is no capacity, they can't annex. That's the 3 points.
The other thing is we could just say that county government has plenty of capacity. We have no desire to expand the plant. That's it.
That's kind of my point is we know we have capacity. So if something wants to build, so be it. So that stops your annexation piece. And if they want to gain capacity, fix your I&I problem.
That's where we've been.
So how would fixing their I&I problem give them more capacity?
It would reduce flow into the plant.
It would. And so
Stormwater, right?
we are.
So what happens is that so their reserve is here, they're here now, they just drop it here.
So, yeah, if you average it out, that's exactly what would happen.
We have to keep space open for stormwater. Where if they let stormwater went in there, they'd have more space. for
Even with the
flush.
rain we had today, you had flow at your plant with the minimal
So
rain.
they're
you had
better
today.
utilizing their reserve.
That's right.
Okay, I understand.
And it also builds and strengthens our system. Don't want to worry about this because, I mean, you don't want to make too big a deal out of this, but what happens if a plant overflows? Sewage goes into your
Violations.
waterways.
Yeah.
You've already permitted, but forget about that aspect for a second. What practically happens? You got sewer in the creek.
So that's a great transition for a question I have. We've had some preliminary meetings about establishing, talking about having a resiliency board or some kind of work. There's a guy at Clemson, there's some work with ACOG, talking about building up the resiliency of Pickens County. There's a lot of resiliency around stormwater plants, around sewer treatment plants. I know there's grant funding around that, but at what point, I mean, it seems like you were paving the path for this, Mr. Roper, when you're going through, they all need these retention areas. So if we build up resiliency of all the plants, which is giving them all these, the Roper's feature of the retention pond, it's not a pond, it's a retention tank.
I mean, it kind of is a pond. It's a hole in the ground.
Equalization
It's a
basin.
basin.
Equalization basin.
I like basin. Okay, thank you. So if we give all the plants this basin feature, we're improving overall county resiliency and would help with capacity for our municipalities that are.
It's true. And one of the features of this study, which again, we received on Friday, so I don't want y'all to feel like you have to digest this right now, but one of the features is they talk about potential availability of funds to help us with resilience.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have a question too, sorry. I know we're talking about annexation and the building of homes.
Ooh.
Sorry, we're not talking about annexation.
Cautious. I was specifically speaking of the sewer plant when I brought up annexation.
It is true that annexation and the building of homes will impact our sewer capacity.
Yes.
But it's also true that the expansion of businesses, like you said, along 123, these were built for economic development. The county comprehensive plan puts more development in the southern part of the county.
It's true.
There is a hospital has bought land just about next to where this middle plant is. We have, as residence is growing there, businesses are wanting to go there too. So at what point do we, or how do we make the balance between, we don't necessarily, the county doesn't want to get in the game of home building support necessarily, depending on who you are on this council, but maybe we are okay with supporting businesses going in, which is what led to all of these being built in the first place. I guess my point is there interest in expanding the middle plant because we know that industry will also go down in that part of the county.
So I have an example of not an industry, unless you take the loosest term, use that, assisted living facility has written to us to ask us, do you have capacity for us to put 200 beds or something like that, facility there in that area that would use the waste, the middle point? The answer to that right now is we do, but we can only give that once. You know, if we gave a capacity to a facility like that because of economic benefit or whatever, we could push ourselves over the line and force to expand the plant.
Right.
And we may need to anyway for reasons
But I'm
you're talking
saying, might we want to expand it anyway so that businesses like that can come in?
Well, the bigger issue for me is we're still paying the bonds. On it. So we've got another
Yeah, so just
2027 and 2028 is paid off. I think that would be a better opportunity.
Yeah,
Probably
there
just reroll
is
those
that, Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right. The two of our bonds pay off in 27 and 28. We still owe about $1 million on those, and those are from that Roper upgrade years ago. And then the middle expansion, that bond comes off a few years after that. So we do have some coming off. We also, through the use of availability fees, people reserving capacity through the years and through just taking care of money. As of the last audit, we had $3.6 million in fund balance in the Public Service Commission. So we're not without assets there. We think that might be closer to closer to 500, about 5 million now. Thank you. I appreciate it. 5 million now that's available for what we might need to do if we need a match or if we need to figure out a way to build resilience.
But your priorities are, if I'm reading you right, is to build those lagoons.
Priority one,
really?
Stop it.
Oh,
We
really?
need to fix that and make that thing work. It's sitting offline right now. And,
Okay, so that's right. And how are you going to pay for that?
well, we're going to have a combination of FEMA reimbursement, which we're going to bring this proposal to you in April. FEMA reimbursement and our insurance payment, because that was an insured facility, so we get some insurance.
Could you use any of the public service money for that?
We could.
It'd be cooler to have FEMA and insurance.
Yeah. And then the
It'd
second priority is to build those 2 lagoons.
Yes, that's what I would say. I will tell you that this report lays that out in a series of options for you all to consider. But I would say, and I think, I don't want to contradict me as I sit here as your boss. Feel free to do that. But I think that we, on our staff side, agree that those detention basins would be a huge asset, given the nature.
2 plants or all plants?
Just those 2.
Okay, so what's going to happen is when it rains a lot, and those systems start putting a lot of water into your plant instead of flowing past the limits, it would just get caught in the basins and you slowly feed it.
That's right.
Now, is that going to give the plant more?
It's not going to change 1 million gallons a day. 1 million gallons a day is 1 million gallons a day. But what it's going to do is keep you from artificially boiling past that and DHEC mandating that.
Okay, but it doesn't, but it doesn't change.
It's not going to change the math.
Okay.
But that's where you got to think about the practical side of it. The other reason you do this is so you don't end up with sewage in the creek.
The plant just can't handle it.
It just can't handle it.
It's a system regulated.
I mean, like
That's
at the
right.
university.
I call it a level spread. That's what makes sense to
So
me.
those are your 2 priorities.
Those are the 2 priorities. The third is an option, a consideration that you all need to have about what's your policy with sewer. I will tell you, to your point, before we conclude, Mr. Chairman, the IGA, and you'll want your county attorney to look at this, because this is beyond what I should be telling you, or giving you legal advice on. I can tell you this. It's pretty clear that the cities can't go buy it from somebody else for this service area. Annexation or no. So if it's in the sewage, if it's in the service area contemplated by this agreement, which is literally a map, an appendix with a map around it that goes to the county line, they can't get it from somebody else.
So City of Clemson uses an Anderson or a plant in Pendleton.
But they're not a party to this agreement.
Okay, so, but Central cannot go to that Pendleton plant?
Agreed.
Right.
Fascinating. Thanks.
You see how this is an onion?
Yeah.
One other thing, Mr. Chairman, is we're talking about 85%, but DHEC makes you engineer it at 80%. So you have to start digging with a shovel at 85%.
So we're running about 75%.
Yeah, and so we're ahead of the game. We've already done some of our preliminary feasibility on that. We're ahead of the game, and that's the takeaway that I would like to say for staff, is that we do have serious decisions to make, but we have the ability to make those decisions because staff was judicious with the way we used our allocation over the last 2 or 3 years. We could have sold every bit of it the minute we wanted to.
If your plan up at the stockade is you ultimately want to move building maintenance and
Building maintenance.
vehicle maintenance up there, and you're gonna need that, you need sewer for that, and you'll be able to handle that.
Yep.
That's just part of the.
That's
one of
part of the
steps to
plan.
get there.
That's right.
I have one more question. So your priorities you just said are fix stockade and then build these basins. But what I don't see, and that works with resiliency, but what I don't see right now is anything that's forward looking to the growth that we know is coming. We've been sitting around here for 2 years talking about the growth because it's coming. So at this point, it seems strange to me that we are not talking about expanding any of these plants when we've been sitting around talking about how many people are moving here.
So in the study that we paid for and carried through with, that you mentioned, it does give those options. That is a conversation that we need to have.
Okay. So we may look into expanding.
Right. That's y'all's decision.
And that's the only one that we're,
That goes back to the bond thing. Pay the bond.
well, what time, when we do them. I'm not saying that this is this fiscal year. I'm just saying, like, I thought we would be having a discussion with all this growth. Don't our sewer plants need to be growing?
Well, we haven't allocated our remaining capacity because we know what our financing is. We know when those bonds, we're trying to get to that point instead of having to, build sewer capacity now. Because we have to. So we've been judicious over the last few years. Man, yeah, right.
Any other questions on this topic? Any other comments? We're at the end of the agenda. Oh, yeah.
I have one, going back to the stockade plant. You want to bring it back online. You also mentioned that you're anticipating some growth in that area, some projects. Would it be financially feasible to make an upgrade with that process of bringing it back online? Would it save the county money at that time?
That's a very good question. The truth of the matter is that plant is really too large already.
Okay.
And when I say it's too large, what is it they put in that plant, Rodney? When it's running, I want to say it's cat food. We have to put waste into that plant because it was designed to handle a prison. And it's got a couple of bathrooms at Roads and Bridges and the animal shelter. So it's not getting enough waste to keep the bacteria going. So we don't really need to expand it, but it's not knowing that, that's the most logical question that you had, Dr. Holloway. Yes.
Anything else on this topic? Okay, we're at the end of the agenda. I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Okay, raise your right hand. Opposed, right sign, approved. Yes.